from my point of view, I feel there's no one more qualified for the job than your good self with regards to the series. How did you feel? What did you feel were the advantages for you going into the project beyond the obvious?
Well, I mean, pretty much the obvious, really, but it was exciting because, I mean, having read the scripts, it was a sort of exciting combination of the old and the new. You know, I mean, very often in a movie, I mean, particularly Captain America: Winter Soldier had a lot of very, as well as the thematic material for Captain America and all the gnarly dissonant material for the Winter Soldier. There was a hell of a lot of creating homemade fabric, as it were, for the sounds and the landscape of that score. And of course, you know, you kill yourself for however many months it is, and when the movie's over, that whole universe that you've made, you know, stays on the hard drive. And you know, because before even starting that score, I spent weeks and weeks, you know, on sound. So before starting this show, it was like, back to, you know, I can open up the cupboard again and let's see what can still be used. You know, obviously in the new show, Bucky's now a civilian, for example, so it's not the Winter Soldier, but there are Winter Soldier flashbacks.
Yeah, sure.
And so, you know, you hear that scream again, you hear the metal clangs, Zemo shows up. So from Captain America Civil War, that spidery, manipulative string theme shows up. I mean, before I started the show, I had a good old sit down because I've done so many scores since then. Yeah, I just listened through to the Winter Soldier. Go, okay, well, we got the original Cap theme, we got the Winter Soldier theme, we got the Zemo theme. I sort of made this audio diary of all the bits and all the textures and all the melodies and everything. But then being a new show, particularly, I don't know if you've heard, you know, the end credit track for the piece that's used in the end credits and that has been pre-released prior to the soundtrack. I was particularly pleased with that because in the original Captain America Winter Soldier, Falcon, of course, is in that movie.
Yeah, sure.
But he tends to get 7-second moments of glory towards the end. So you get this fanfare that went dun, 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 and then the action moves on, you know, and it's back to the Cap theme.
Yeah.
And I always felt that, you know, that's the beginning of something. It's like the first phrase of a more developed thing. But of course, you know, in that original score, I didn't get the chance to develop it. So it was really satisfying. Good example of the sort of taking from the old, but bringing it into the new. That last end credit track takes that theme, da 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 da, and then carries on, da 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 dee da, and you know, I got to finish the tune.
You got some closure.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, how many years? I can't remember when was Winter Soldier 2014. You know, coming back to a one melodic moment from 7 years ago, and then taking that DNA and then finishing a theme. And then the other thing that was exciting about it is I wanted to. Sam's character, there's something about Sam and his background and coming from Louisiana that I wanted to combine, you know, the usual heroic orchestration you'd expect from a superhero with something a little more grounded, a little less classical, which is why that final piece starts with
yeah, because in the opening episode you've got those contemporary themes that come through which separate out the characters.
Yeah, I wanted to give him a bit of grounded sort of blues, as well as, you know, the potential to be a superhero, and kind of mix the two together. So yeah, it's been a sort of interesting recapitulation of bringing back motifs exactly as they were, developing things that used to be motifs into, you know, a full-blown theme. So I guess in that respect, I was sort of qualified because I had a lot of this stuff already sitting in my cupboard, you know. But then there's new stuff, you know.
You've got to tee it up.
Yeah, right, exactly.
For you, obviously, the characters, as you say, they're going through a lot of different things now. So Sam and Bucky are going through divergently different challenges. How did you approach that in terms of composition and orchestration within the score?
Well, it's a good point. I mean, one of the big differences compared to a Marvel movie, however lengthy a Marvel movie is, you know, it's not going to top 2.5 hours. So your sort of character development scenes within a movie, good though they are in Marvel movies, there's not the same real estate. Now we've got 6, you know, 55-minute episodes. It's got more time to breathe in some of these protagonist backstories. So, you know, you've got time to see Bucky being a passive aggressive with his shrink. You know, you've got time to see Sam and his sister struggling to figure out what to do with the boat and being, blocked at the bank from what would seem like a pretty straightforward loan to me. And
sure.
so it's interesting. So for example, with Bucky, that Bucky is not the Bucky of the crazy Winter Soldier scream and the noises and everything. That's like a civilian Bucky. So funny, if you're a real musicological geek, if you listen to the Winter Soldier suite, there's this sort of rising string line right at the end that's sort of buried in all the gnarly chaos. And a bit like a scientist with a syringe and a Petri dish, I sort of stole a bit of that melodic shape, put it into a much more humane context, and that became the Bucky civilian theme. But now it's a lot less stressful sounding, and it's a lot simpler and a lot more intimate. There's a lot of piano and strings and simple guitar for sort of civilian Bucky. And Sam, you know, is context dependent. I mean, there's a couple of Louisiana establishing shots where you definitely hear that, you know, bluesy guitar, a bit of Hammond organ, and a very much like not a classical vibe, but it's so context dependent, because sometimes Sam and Bucky are discussing, you know, the legacy of the Shield, for example.
Yeah, sure.
So you'll get like a little waft of the ghost of Steve Rogers and a little bit of the Cap theme in there. Sometimes Sam is arguing with his sister, you know, about the boat, and that's like that's more like domestic Sam, and you get a bit of that Louisiana vibe. So but very often, what's interesting is those scenes, it allows the music to be a bit smaller in scale, a bit more intimate compared to, funny things about the show, you still get all the massive, you know, if you look at episode 1, that first action sequence, that's, you know, would be straight out, anyone who thinks that, oh, well, maybe Marvel TV is a bit like the production's down from a movie, it's just not true. You know, the big set pieces are massive. And the music is what you'd expect to accompany that. But then these other scenes that we're talking about, these character scenes, allow you to be a bit smaller, a bit more intimate, keep the instrumentation smaller, keep the sort of level of narrative invasion a bit lower. I mean, a good example of that is the character Isaiah has a stunning performance who we've now met in episode 3.
Yeah, sure.
When you get an emotional performance especially with the, let's go. I'm just grabbing a coffee here. Especially given the sort of controversial nature of that, you know, the content, finding out about Isaiah, finding out about an African-American super soldier, all, as you know, brushed under the carpet, including medical tests and, you know, God knows all this stuff where you roll your eyeballs and it all smacks of the truth, you know. You don't want to be too that's an example of a music that needs to be more grounded and more realistic, and not in that elevated fantastical or you know, that you would have say for like taking a stand in the Captain America Winter Soldier. You know, you're really invited to come steaming into the mix, but a really serious scene like the Isaiah scene where it's discussing this hidden history of abused African-American super soldiers is not the time to sort of get in the way with music.
Bombastic and
totally.
It raises a question with regards to John Walker and his introduction. Did that change the dynamic and maybe influence things and take things in a different direction for you?
Well, what was interesting about that, if you listen again, if for the musical geeks out there, if you listen really carefully to the end of episode 1, where he's revealed to the sort of disdain of Sam and Bucky, who, I mean, Bucky's thinking, this is your fault, Sam, because you didn't take the shield.
Didn't step up,
Sam's thinking, you know, I didn't want to take the shield, but I didn't know that guy was, you know, I didn't know that was the next option, right? So I took the Cap theme from Winter Soldier, dun 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 dun. When he gets revealed, only the harmonies change. So instead of giving it the full committed patriotic and unambiguous heroism, it's got a completely different harmonic framework. So the overall effect of it is the tune sort of feels like it's Captain America, but something about the arrangement is making you go,
It's just ever so slightly off kilter.
It's definitely, if it were a cheese, you'd be sniffing it going, I'm not sure I'm going to put that in my sandwich.
So obviously the show was scheduled originally to come out before WandaVision, but it was supposed to come out post Black Widow, if I'm correct.
I think you'd probably know that better than me. But I think you're right. Yeah, it definitely got moved thanks to COVID. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. It just opens up the question. Obviously, it gave you more time, or not that you probably knew that at the time, but how did that maybe
No, it was great,
benefit
actually.
you directly?
Yeah, no, that's a good point, because I was working on Cherry this year, which was incredibly absorbing. I don't know exactly what was supposed to happen, but by some miracle, I ended up being able to really focus on the movie Cherry, which we've discussed.
Yeah, sure.
And they never landed on top of each other. So I obviously had some sort of guardian angel. Whatever happens to the schedule. The other thing in terms of there's a sort of somewhat true cliche that the world of television, and I would hesitate to call this TV, because like Marvel streaming show is not exactly regular TV in terms of production value. It's really a different way of structuring the kind of the production value that they would have in a movie. But having said that, it is true that in the world of TV, you can be unlucky in the schedule is such that some of the artistic discussion and length of time you have to review things and really make artistic discoveries gets compressed, and it can become a sausage factory. That's never really true of Marvel in general, but it is a little bit more true of TV as a genre, because the speed that things can go at. But as a result of the delay that you brought up, that I feel like we had such a good amount of time on it, because I was already talking to Kari at the end of let's see, what year we in, get it right, 2020. I feel like we were talking at the end of 2019. So good progress was already being made at the beginning. I really feel like we all had enough time to absorb and discuss the themes that were coming in from the previous MCU universe, and develop and work on, say, the Flag Smasher tone that was a new vocabulary. Yeah, I basically felt like the whole creative process was exactly the same as a movie, i.e. lots of beard stroking and music meetings, and it was never like quick, yeah, that'll do, chuck it in. We had plenty of time.
That's pretty much what actually leads on to my next question, which is, obviously you have the Flag Smashers, you've got Zemo in there, you have the Power Broker, so you've got all these different variations of threat within the show. I mean, I think there's another one, but obviously just the relevant ones. What type of challenges did that throw up for you? Obviously having these divergent types of threat, but having to give them each their own sort of identity.
Yeah, well, it was good. Well, that's the fun of it, because these are the sort of new elements. And I won't say too much about the Power Broker, because I may do a slip of the tongue, and we're only on episode 3.
Don't know too much.
Exactly, and I could get, the Marvel sniper might sort of get me from the roof, rightly so, if I start prattling on too much about the Power Broker. But let's take the Flag Smashers, for example. We've had 3 episodes. We've seen, well, what I enjoy about the Flag Smashers is, and I don't mind either way. Sometimes you do a movie or a show where there is a defined evil villain and there's no ambiguity about it, and that's great fun. That's great fun, because you get to do a sort of hugely villainous theme. Winter Soldier, for example, the split second he shows up on screen, there's no messing around. He's bad news. Yeah, sure. What's interesting about the Flag Smashers is the audience by the end of episode 3, we'll be a little bit torn, because we don't exactly know where it's going. They're clearly idealistic. And they're a little fanatical. Some of their aims seem to be quite admirable. I mean, they might be robbing those, immigration stations, but they're robbing it to grab medicines to give to people who are suffering. Yeah, sure. And you know what I mean? So it's like a sort of, it's probably how the US government felt about Hamas or something. It's like, what do you do about a group that's technically defined as terrorists, but actually they're sort of, in the eyes of some people, they're helping people. So it's a much more ambiguous. You can tell that lines maybe are getting a little bit crossed in how they go about things, but it's not an obvious, the ends that group have are not entirely unadmirable. And that is interesting musically, because, it's not an out-and-out villain theme. And what we found, funny enough, as a group between Kari and Jeff Ford, the picture editor, because they're throwing things up with temp and whatnot. Given that there was a lot of melody and a lot of melodically recognizable material for Bucky and Zemo and all the rest of it, the Flag Smashers, especially to start with, there is a pregnant melody in there which will develop more and more as the show goes. But to start with, they've got a sort of dystopian, slightly electronic. It's texturally dissonant, but which is not quite the same thing as being like narratively evil. It's more like it's sort of sonically a bit disjointed.
Sure.
There's a little melody in there that'll start developing that actually has a little aspiration and idealism to it, but it's surrounded by sounds of violence and fracture, which is, and so I was grateful to the writing that the Flag Smashers actually do present that sort of moral dilemma that they're not straightforward. And as yet, I mean, the audience by the end of, where are we, episode 3?
Yeah.
You don't quite know where, they're not plain sailing, but they're not, it's perhaps a group that maybe you want to talk to before you
there's a lot of ambiguity going into the midway point. So where we are exactly, I'm not entirely sure. What I was going to do, there's a question around the introduction of Zemo right at the end of episode 2.
Yes.
And I'm a bit of an Amadeus fan. I, for some reason, don't know why, but I'm obsessed. And
it's a very good play and it's a very good movie.
Yeah, that's what I say, but my wife disagrees. Anyway, the point is that obviously the Mozart's Requiem is featured in the introduction to the character, as in reintroduction to the character. Was there any particular reason for that piece of music, that particular choice?
Funnily enough, that choice was even before I got involved in the score, and I think it was probably a combination of Kari, Jeff Ford, picture editor, and the music supervisor Dave Jordan. I think. Apart from anything else, it's really nice sometimes when you've got a lot of score just to have these punctuation moments where you throw in a song or you throw in something, complete. Like when you first meet Shelby, there's a great song in there that throws things off, away from the score for a bit. And I thought it was a great move and signed off on it in seconds, because to me, I mean, apart from anything else, my Zemo theme is quite sort of, for want of a better word, it's a bit highbrow and posh, with its string writing, and it's quite overtly classical. So it made complete sense to me. I mean, what he said, Zemo is forever, as well as being manipulative, his demeanor is sort of, he likes to see himself as a somewhat educated and sophisticated individual. And you find out in episode 3, that they sit there like, where all these cars come from? It's like, I'm Baron Zemo, I've got my own.
And all this culture comes out.
Yes, but he's not like Rockstar. He's not like Tony Stark. He's got a sort of 80-year-old butler, and he enjoys his fine wines and his, vintage vehicles. And I'm sure if you wanted to sit down with Zemo and discuss, European poetry from sort of 1750 to 1910, he would hold forth, and he sees himself as a highly educated, very European character. So I think that for that reason, that choice of putting the classical needle drop in there, I thought it was a really smart move. And then of course but talking about ambiguity, it's the same thing with Zemo. I mean, he's teamed up with our protagonist, but there's always a bit of you that thinks, well, they do seem to be a trio during episode 3, but there's always a bit of you that can't help just keeping an eye on Zemo.
Well, the same thing occurs to me with Bucky as well, because obviously, you've got the enabler there, and
right.
And you have, so you don't entirely know whether or not that's all been suppressed. So
it's like having a reformed alcoholic, and then one of the guys on the team every now and then tries to slip him a bit of whiskey.
Exactly. It's exactly that. One question that occurred to me, I have to mention the infomercial, the GRC introduction, episode 3. So for me, it's the same as the Mozart piece in terms of it's quite a departure, and it's quite simple. But what I noticed is, and I could be wrong, but in the chord progression for the piano, there's Auld Lang Syne in there. Am I wrong? At the end.
But that, funnily enough, that wasn't actually completely conscious.
No.
But it may have been subconscious, because it's funny. It's there's an enjoy. It's almost over comforting, that piece. You know, it's got that same level of satirical. It's got a satirical edge to it that I've forgotten the name of the camera. I'm having a mental block now, but you know, the idea of government advertisements that are pushed a little bit far, so that you there's a wink to it. There's a bit of satire to it. You know what it reminds of? Paul Verhoeven, you see that in things like in Total Recall, they would like get on the tube and you get an advert going, are you tired of yourself? You need a vacation from your own selfhood. Come to Chemical Implants, you know, and it's like an advertisement for getting one of their like internal neurological vacations, you know.
You get that. I think he does it in RoboCop as well.
Yeah.
But exactly. I liked it because obviously you've got the visual element just the other side of it, which is basically it throws the audience off. So exactly. I wondered if that was a relevant thing or was a subconscious thing.
No, it's I think it was probably subconscious, but I do like that bit of filmmaking because it does satirize, you know, when you get sort of the soft glow and the soft focus and the sort of over comforting music that accompanies, you know, medical adverts of some kind, where all sorts of metaphors and euphemisms are used because no one wants to use the word cancer or talk about bowel movements, and then at the end there's the super speeded up, you know, side effects may include death.
they do I believe there's a tenor advert as well which they always put on late at night and you're like, where did that come from, you know? So anyway, I digress. My last question to you, having seen the whole run, as you have been privileged to do, as is your position, would you consider the Falcon and the Winter Soldier to be as much of a perceived game changer as WandaVision is considered now? And I know it's a no-win situation question.
Yeah, it's a very difficult question to answer. I would say that people have seen half the show, but you haven't seen half of what goes down. There's more than half of, in terms of the content and the implications of what happens. And so I would say, by the time you get to the material that is addressed in that last episode, I would say Marvel are going places they have not been, and that's all I can say.
That's as much as I could ever hope for.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your time, Henry. It's been an absolute pleasure as ever.
Brilliant.
Enjoy the rest of your evening and take care.
Indeed. All right. See you soon.
Now.
Bye.
Bye-bye.